What's up, Geeksters? It's me, Omar from geeksterlabs.com, and today I have my full review of the Canon XC15 4K camcorder. Now, this camera retails for $2,400 currently on B&H Photo.com, and I want to thank them for lending me this camera to review and test out for you guys. I'll put a link in the description below if you guys are interested in buying this camera from there. And just so you guys know, this is the final video in my series of XC15 videos that I've made for this camera. If you're interested in viewing those other videos that cover the detailed unboxing, that show sample footage, or for a full physical tour of this camera, then click on the card in the top right corner of this video. So let's get to the review. So the XC15 is marketed as a professional camcorder, but there are definitely some features that I think even some pros would want to have on this camera if it was going to be their main camera. And I can't help but notice that there's actually a lot of features that this camera borrows from the C300 Mark II, which is definitely a good thing, but not when you consider some of its missing features. So the question is the XC15 a great standalone professional camcorder, or is it more of a C100 or C300 secondary B camera? Well, let's find out. So the XC15 is packing a 1-inch CMOS sensor and a DIGIC DV5 processor, which allows for some great, stunning, sharp footage. And with that 1-inch sensor, it's able to capture Ultra HD 4K video with a resolution of 3840 by 2160. It can record 4K footage in 24 and 30 frames per second at up to 305 megabytes per second. However, you're only able to record 4K footage onto CFast cards, which are not cheap. Currently, a 65 gigabyte CFast card will run you about $200, and it'll only give you around 30 minutes of 4K footage if you're recording at 24 frames per second at 205 megabytes per second. A larger 256 gigabyte CFast card, which is the max I could find online, will cost you around $600. Another thing to keep in mind is that the video files come in an MXF wrapper in an H.264 based codec, which means you'll need to import and convert the footage in an editing program. And if you're a Final Cut Pro user, this is currently going to be an issue for you since this camera isn't compatible with Final Cut Pro, and there really isn't a simple, seamless way to get the 4K footage that's been recorded on the CFast card to import into Final Cut. Trust me, I've spent hours trying to figure this out with no luck. Of course, if you're watching this video a few months after I'm filming it right now, then this might not be an issue for you. But if you use programs like Premiere or Avid, you should be fine. So needless to say, you won't be able to just plug in the USB cable into your computer and pull the video files off of it like other cameras, which is totally fine for a professional workflow, but for an average consumer that might be considering this camera for 4K recordings, it might be a deal breaker for you. The XC15 also has a slot for SD cards, but the highest resolution it'll allow you to capture on those is 1080p at 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. And if you want to record in 120 frames per second for smooth slow-mo, this camera can also do that as well at 720p resolution. And thankfully, importing footage from the SD card is a seamless process for Final Cut Pro users. And while we're on the topic of pro features and specs, let's go ahead and get a few of those out of the way. Now, I mentioned earlier that the XC15 would make a great B camera for someone shooting with like a Canon C300 Mark II, and that's because this camera actually borrows many features from that camera. For example, it features 9 onboard movie looks in the option, like for EOS Standard, Canon Log, YDR, and more, as well as having 2 customizable ones. It also features waveform monitoring, which aids in accurately monitoring video signal characteristics during outdoor shooting or when lighting conditions make the display really difficult to see, although using the included viewfinder could help with that as well. It also has shutter speeds that match the C300 for flicker reduction, and the shutter speeds have been changed to 1/24 of a second and following with the 23.98 sequence, which improves the usability for cinema productions. You can switch between shutter speed and shutter angle as well. Those features, along with really great focus peaking, zebra, and color bars, really proves that this camera deserves to live in the professional camcorder section. Now, when it comes to audio, this is definitely where the XC15 outpaces cameras like DSLRs and other cameras that shoot 4K. Audio quality is usually neglected with those types of cameras, but not with the XC15. One of the biggest updates from the Canon XC10 to the XC15 is the inclusion of the MA400 microphone adapter, which was actually originally designed for the C300 Mark II. It's shoe mountable from 2 different positions, and it even features a shotgun mic holder. And with the adapter, you have 2 XLR inputs with available phantom power and onboard audio controls. And you'll be able to monitor your audio with the headphone jack as well. So let's move on to some of the physical aspects of the XC15. Now I'm not going to get super detailed about the camera body because like I said earlier, I have a separate video where I cover every inch of this camera in great detail, but I do want to mention a few things. For one, the build quality of this camera is very sturdy and it feels very solid in the hand. It only weighs about 2 pounds by itself, and the form factor looks like a cross between a baby C300 and a DSLR. But don't let that fool you, because unlike those types of cameras, this one has a fixed lens that is a 35mm equivalent with an aperture range of f2.8 to 5.6 with light drop off when fully zoomed. And speaking of zoom, when in movie mode it goes from 27.3 to 273mm, and it can be adjusted with the manual zoom ring, which is pretty smooth. It also features a smooth focus ring, which can be adjusted in the menu settings to be slow or quick. It's a good lens and should be adequate for most shoots, but I would still prefer to have the ability to swap out different lenses with it. Now let's discuss the lack of physical controls on this camera, which kind of leaves me scratching my head. How is it that a camera like Canon's XF105 can give you access to many quick buttons that you would expect on a pro level camcorder, but for the XC15 you have to rely mostly on the touchscreen to get to settings like ISO, shutter speed, and white balance. And if you're using the viewfinder, you won't have easy access to the touchscreen and you'll have to use the thumbstick function menu. Now you can assign the control dial to change aperture, shutter speed, or ISO gain, which is nice, but I wish the assignable buttons on the camera also allowed you to quickly access these settings as well, but they don't. Speaking of that touchscreen display, it is very sharp and responsive, but it only tilts up and down and doesn't flip out, which is kind of a deal breaker for me since I'm a one-man crew and I need to be able to see myself to frame the shot and make sure I'm in focus while filming videos, although the camera does feature some pretty decent autofocus and face detection. Image stabilization was good on the XC15 as long as you didn't walk around with the camera. Even when the dynamic power image stabilization was turned on, it didn't really smooth out the footage by much, but for handheld filming and doing panning shots, it was totally fine. So there's no denying that this camera can shoot some great footage and has the ability for pro level audio, but depending on your needs and circumstances, it might not be the right camera for you. If you're an average consumer who is looking for a camera that can capture 4K footage, then I would recommend looking at other 4K consumer camcorders. And there's plenty to pick from that are below $1,000. But if you're a pro videographer looking for an inexpensive B camera to pair with your C300 Mark II or a C100, then this is definitely the camera for you. For me personally, since I do all my own filming, not having the flip out screen is kind of a deal breaker for me. That, along with the lack of a detachable lens, pretty much knocks out this camera. I think I'll stick with my $800 Panasonic Lumix G7 for filling my 4K needs. But that's just me. So what do you guys think? Can the XC15 stand on its own as a pro level camcorder, or is it just a C300B camera? Sound off in the comment section below and let me know what you think. And if I missed anything or you have any questions about this review, post them down there as well. I read all the comments in all of my videos and I always answer back as quickly as possible. I just want to thank B&H Photo for lending me this camera again to review for you guys. If you're interested in purchasing this or any other items from their site, please use my link in the description below. And once again, don't forget to check out my other XC15 videos on my channel as well and subscribe while you're there. So I'll see you guys in the next video review.